Hello and welcome to our latest Big Read episode, all about aging in place. The Singapore government recently launched the Healthier SG movement. The whole white paper, the whole discussion is about redefining how healthcare, or as Ong Yi Kang has says, we're not in the Ministry of Health, we're in the Ministry of Illness. So I think there's a lot of re-looking at how Singapore manages and takes care of its population. And I think one of the biggest discussions now is about aging in place. So we are fortunate today to have Dr. Tang Leng, a cultural anthropologist with the Department of Japanese Studies from the National University of Singapore. Dr. Tang is also the president of the Gerontological Society of Singapore. Welcome.
Thank you.
So we all are in this silver generation, or I work closely with a lot of seniors around the whole of Singapore. And you see different dynamics, seniors coming from different backgrounds. So it's not a one size fit all. And different societal background, cultural background, and experiences. So how do we actually think about aging? I mean, from your experience, what is the current mindset about aging in Singapore?
Well, I guess, as you already said, there's this diversity in terms of older people, and I think recognizing the diversity is very important. Especially now, I feel that with the baby boomers coming on board, we all know that by 2030, we're going to have 1 in 4 that are age 65 and above. And that's because we have a big baby boomer generation. I think it's like about 30% of our population will be age 65, age 60 and above. So I think recognizing the diversity is important, and knowing that we, in fact, older people are growing healthier. I do have friends who are in their 90s and still working and healthy because they keep a healthy lifestyle, throughout the years and so forth. So I would say that it's good to use the word healthier SG because it gives a very positive vibe of life can be healthier, although we have to at the same time recognize that there could be ways to. I mean, this whole idea of at the same time, we talk about growing longer life's expectancy, but the health expectancy at the same time we see really a 10 years gap with our health expectancy. So I think this healthier SG really comes with the idea of hoping to push that health span longer so that it's closer to our life expectancy.
So aging in place isn't a new term. We all have parents who are old and are still living at home. Is it wrong to say aging in place is choosing to die at home?
Yeah, that's part of it as well.
Okay.
You want to age in place. You want to live and age in place and die in place.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's part of it, dying at home.
But a lot of the elderly sick in particular, they don't get to die at home. Almost 70% end up dying in the hospital. Because, once when they are having some chronic breathing problems, they get sent to the hospital. And in a sense, they don't get to die at home. That's something that they wished for. So how will that actually help if you are pushing something like aging in place?
I think it's really interesting that we talk about dying at home when we talk about aging in place and dying in place. And I can imagine, now we talk about the GPs, right? If you have a GP that's nearby that looks after you, and that's really what happened to my mother-in-law. So when she died at home, the GP just came and then certified, right? So, but imagine that if somebody who choose to want to die at home, it's important to have that care, consistent care not just GP, but also the whole palliative team in place to make it possible for people to die comfortably at home. So it's interesting when we talk about aging in place, we actually talk a lot about healthcare, but we actually should be also talking to the end of the journey.
Yeah, that was on my mind, because we always talk about aging in place, and ultimately when you're really sick, and then you sent to the home or you get sent to the hospital, like we really tried. My family tried to look after my dad at home, right to the last moment where we just couldn't manage it. Then we had to go into a CC. So I always thought that aging in place is right up to before you pass, and then you have to hand over depending on whether he passes away at home. So actually aging in place is like what you just mentioned, that whole runway, till you die, and the palliative care. So we talked about having the GP, but is the GP the right person to be the central core, that peg that holds the community together? Because I mean, I come from the sporting background, and I remember very clearly that when the government, from an infrastructure, from a facility perspective, made sure that within 400 meters they had actual measurements, like there must be a field, there must be a recreation, there must be a fitness corner in that whole urban planning. But I don't see that, or maybe we are just at the infancy of Healthier SG, but for Healthier SG to really take place, you need all that within the community, and not only palliative care, you need that physio, that whole ancillary support network for the patient, but also for the family. Do you see that existing here? But before that, sorry, I talk a lot. Have you seen in any other country that they have that whole system in place?
The ideal, as you say about with sports, is that it will be ideal if you have, with a certain distance from your home, that you have all kinds of services that are ready. I can't remember what's the distance for Japan, but I remember very well that I do visit Japan a lot, and visit a lot of the aging facilities, and one of the of course, Japan now is trying to have a more, it's really moving towards aging in place, to have a integrated community care system for every individual older person. So among the kind of services they have is what you call small, Takino, Shokibo Takino. I'm thinking of it in Japanese. Among the services they have is the small scale multifunctional centers. So how it pan out to be, or how many of these services are available, depend on the areas. So some areas, they have it in houses that are empty, because in Japan there are a very aged society, especially in rural areas. They have houses that are left empty after the older person passed away, because the children are probably living in the city or other places. So some of these empty houses, vacant houses, are being used as services for the community, and they run really a whole host of services for older people. So they could be running meal services for older people who are living close by. They could be running a daycare service, or even in cases where they need respite care, then the older people could be sent into this setting for some time, or even with end-of-life care. So we do see cases of people who were living there, staying overnight there, and they pass away. So I thought that kind of setting is pretty home-like, in the sense that it's a small, some are the vacant houses, but some are like part of a nursing home, for example. So the nursing home also runs this kind of services. And it brings the sense of familiarity, because a lot of services are from the same place and the same people. So I thought that's quite an interesting way of allowing for community to develop because of the services that were able to support them.
From your experience, does it cost a lot of money to have this? And in Japan, you mentioned, was it a ground up initiative, or was it really a government or a municipal led program?
So in Japan, because of the long-term care insurance, so they have, everybody would pay certain amount into the long-term care insurance, and then when they need services, depending on which category of the long-term care level they are diagnosed at, then they will pay. They sometimes, if they're levels, I think if they're level 3 and above, they can go to nursing home. Before that, they should be staying in a community. Then they will be able to pay only like 10% or 20% of the service cost. So it's not so costly for them. So a lot of, in fact, small boutique kind of services have sprouted out. Non-profit services especially, to serve the older people, within the community, because of the availability of long-term care insurance.
Nice. Yeah, to me, always cost is a factor. So,
Yes.
I mean, I was also thinking, how about our neighbors, Malaysia, Indonesia? How are they actually doing it? I think it must have existed in the kampong days where everybody's looking at it. So we are theoretically going back where it is your community looking after the community.
Oh, yes. In Japan also, I do see some places where really the neighbors play a very important role in caring for the seniors. Yeah.
So there's a major mindset and cultural thinking that Singapore needs to change, Healthy SG is good. But if we continue with the expectation that, the government must build A to Z first before we can work, I think we won't get it right.
But aren't they actually starting something like that in Queenstown?
Oh, yeah. I'm actually involved with the health district at Queenstown. In Queenstown, we are trying things like, home hospitals, and trying to really have much more support for the older person. So we're trying all kinds of interventions as well to see whether it works. Yes, but I think besides the health aspect, encouraging people to go for annual checkups and things so that they are able to stay healthier. One important aspect in the Queenstown Health District is really also getting people to recognize the importance of purposeful life. Purposeful in the sense that people really should, be motivated. How do you motivate people to do things that will be held good for them in the later life? For example, encouraging people to volunteer, to think about volunteering, to come together, and contribute to the community, to engage in lifelong learning, and if they prefer to work part-time or some flexi work, that we hope the community itself will have such kind of opportunities available for them. Yeah.
Nice. It'll be quite exciting.
Yes.
So how do you see the role of the doctors? I mean, now they are playing an integral part, the GP, in this whole initial push towards healthier SG and aging in place. I mean, what do you think about
Yeah,
their
so
role?
actually when we were discussing, this whole idea of having the GPs playing an important roles, then I was saying, wouldn't it be good if clinics were, have maps of the neighborhood to tell you, the walking routes that are good, and how long they are, and so that you can, when people go to visit clinics, they can also really get to know how to stay healthy, how to eat healthy, and all those with all the information available. But I think is good. I mean, GPs are nested in the community. It's good that they play a role. But I'm just wondering, how will it add to their workload? I hope.
Yeah.
Because then, nowadays, if it's very busy time for GPs, they only see you perhaps 2 minutes, right? So if they have to give you a lot more information and all that, then it actually stretch out the time, and will that make a queue longer for the patients?
And GPs are also complaining about, patients complaining to them that they're charging too much for the medication.
Oh,
And,
yes.
Yes. And they were wondering if they could jump on the bandwagon of polyclinics where they can get the generic drugs much cheaper.
But I really like it when you said that there should be more information at the GPs. I mean, when you go to a GP, all you see is pharmaceutical advertisements, selling this, selling that. I've never seen a healthy message.
Yeah, so I think it would be good if, but really, what comes to my mind was, I would like to know if I want to walk in the neighborhood, to keep myself healthy, what are some of the best routes there are, where are the, exercise stations and all those kind. So I thought, if I can get this kind of information while I'm just waiting, doing nothing in the GP, that would actually help me to think of, maybe changing my lifestyle a little bit.
True. I mean, I just to add to that, I mean, the GPs, they play an important role because of their experience in to be able to advise on healthy living. But I felt that Singapore it's structured. You have your GRCs, you have your SMCs, but if you drill further down, you have your community leaders. Singapore is really well connected, and from a hierarchical point of view, the People's Association, then you have your condos. I think these little pockets of communities, they do have their committees, they do have their leaders. They are the ones that can play a bigger role in this whole healthier SG, either as a resource person. I mean, of course we have to train them, but information, I mean, you pass to them and they'll pass it, because they are the aunties and uncles of the community, and they know everyone. They will spread the message. I think we need to find a way to bring them into this whole healthier SG movement.
Yeah, I think the silver generation ambassadors as well, right? They are also the ones that knock on doors and try to introduce to the residents the kind of healthy aging messages and so forth. So I just hope that, besides just health, staying healthy, that there will be more about social aspects that they will also be advising or, bringing the information to.
So it's interesting that we talked about the community, the facilities, what is needed to make it work. But how about understanding aging in place? What does it actually mean, let's say for us and for our parents, So for us or for our parents would be autonomy, connection, social support, independence, because you're familiar, you are somewhere and you are surrounded by people that can look after you. But that's from their perspective. But from our perspective, is we are the caregivers. And if we don't have a support, how do we care for them? Or if we are as old as our parents when they grow older, how do we care for them? So in your line of work and in your engagement with the ground, how does these two groups view aging in place? Do they view it both positively and they embrace it, or would say, you go old folks home might be easier for us, or we just hire a helper, or not care from a distance? I mean, how does these two group people view aging in place? I mean, from a discussion and perspective.
I think older people, I mean, obviously, if they can age in place in somewhere they're familiar, I think that's, especially if they have good neighbors that they can, they have mutual support with. I think that's, of course, pretty ideal. But sometimes the main thing about aging is really who is going to care, who is going to pay, right? So,
Yes.
so if you save enough, you have enough for finances. That's okay. But you still have this issue of who is going to care when you need care, staying put, in an environment. So of course, the first layer of care we usually refer to as the children, right? Spouse and children as caregivers. So what kind of support they can have. I think that's important because I think it's great that we are putting a lot more attention on caregivers nowadays than maybe 5 years ago, because this is really a big issue, and caregivers themselves get burned out, and affects their own emotional health as well. Yeah, so I think that's important. So the care for caregivers, which then boils down to what are the services that are available in the community to support aging in place. So quite often older people will say, I want to go to nursing home. Not because they want to go to nursing home, because they think they don't want to be a burden to their children. Yeah. So how can we help people who obviously feel that they will be much more comfortable aging in place at home, to be able to continue to do so? I think is important. But that also means that our environment, of course, have to be age friendly, that you can, go out in a wheelchair comfortably. And then also our home has to be age friendly, right? Yeah, because if your home is not age friendly, you have forests, then sometimes it's more dangerous staying at home, to age in place than to move to somewhere that's safer. Yeah. So how can we better use technology to leverage on technology so that we can live comfortably in the home environment? So I think there are different concerns and different things we would have to plan for. So nowadays, people in their 50s and 60s would start thinking, okay, do I want to stay in this place? Should I move to a smaller place because my children have, grown up, moved out, so I don't need such a big place? Can I move to somewhere smaller? Can I move, what are the options for me and where to stay? And do I want to age in place? Right? So those are things that people in the 50s and 60s are starting to think about. And together with moving place, I think, as you say, that people are starting to think more about about planning for later life. And I think that plan for later life also include the plan for your living environment, for your home environment, to be able to support you for living in place, for aging in place.
Yeah. I mean, as I was coming in, I saw a house being developed, and I was like, what's this thick piece of block coming up? Actually, it's a lift shaft, so it's a house and they're renovating and they're actually building a lift shaft. And, there must be a elderly family member living in there. And the other thing I look at is, I think our housing, HDB has to relook at how they build. We are promoting communal living areas on the ground floor, but there are 12 stories, 25 stories. Should every floor have a communal area that people can gather to do things, to exercise and stuff like that?
Wasn't that planned for the CCAs, that every floor has a communal area?
Yes, the community
Nice.
care apartments, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so I think the urban environment actually impact us more than we think.
Yeah, I mean, it forces us to interact.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
And it provides opportunities. Could be every floor can have a garden or a planter. It really makes a difference. But are we too late? The boomers are getting old already. Do you think there's time, or whatever we're going to do now, we're just going to miss the boomers?
We just have to do it from now. I don't think we can wait very much longer. I think it's really important that we do, we really accelerate and do a lot more from now. we do see changes. I mean, if you compare with 10 years ago, actually, a lot of things have changed. We do see a lot more services around nowadays. And, they are building the active aging centers to try to encourage more people to stay active and so forth. But we will need more.
So you talked about a lot of emphasis has been on health, but the mental aspect, it's missing, or sorry, the social aspect. Would you want to elaborate more on this whole social aspect of wellness and healthy living?
Yeah, I think if you talk about, I think in Singapore, we tend to focus a lot more about health, right? Like, we care for our parents. We want to make sure they eat well, they are healthy. But sometimes we may lack more social engagements, because I think we're just used to that kind of very instrumental support that we give. So we tend to, like my father, has dementia and is on wheelchair. And sometimes we feel that we don't know how to talk to them as well, right? Because we're so used to kind of providing more of the instrumental support. So nowadays I try to, just sit down and talk to him and see what he has to say. And he says interesting things. So I feel that we need to really spend more time to communicate with each other, that we sometimes kind of forget. Yeah, and I think that's, we also should try to encourage our children, the grandchildren, to talk with their grandparents as well. I think we kind of, in our busy urban life, sometimes forget about that. So it's good to try to really think of, pay attention to communication, in our family life.
It's also with the neighbors, because previously the flats all have the common corridor. When you come out, you see your neighbors. But if you were to go to a 5-room flat, or even a 3-room, 4-room mixed flat, the corners, you will have 2 doors facing each other. And when you come home, you don't see a neighbor, you just go into your own house and you just shut the main door. So perhaps they should rethink about the common corridor.
I think that may be a bit difficult. I mean, that could be challenging because people want to have more privacy nowadays as well. I remember I was on a Grab, and then the driver, who was like looking quite young, old, and then he was telling me, he's actually 70 something and still very healthy, and telling me about how he was so bored at home after he was retired, and then he decided to become a Grab driver. And he was saying that how when he used to live in kampongs, where people don't even need to close their door, at night when they sleep, and all the neighbors know each other so well, and they play together. So he was saying that one day, he's quite a chatty person. So one day he said he took a lift, and then he saw this man, and then he said, did you just move here? And the man said, I have stayed here for 20 years. And then he said, oh my goodness, I don't even know that neighbor who has lived here for 20 years. That shows how distant we are, although we are living so close by. I think this is something I thought is very interesting, and something for our food for thought, that how do we kind of really, how do we try to open up ourselves as well, so that we can know more of our neighbors.
I think that's a real issue, that social community disconnect. More so those who are homebound, those who cannot get out of the house. So I think that's where the community, your RCs, we need to find a way to get people out, and the communal spaces, every floor or downstairs is a key thing. But just to really sum up this whole topic about aging in place, it's obvious that there are certain gaps. One of it would be software and the approach whereby, we're talking about health, we're talking about wellness. I think the initial government push is for 60 and above, and then they're going to go down to the 40. But I think that whole software in terms of people, in terms of environment, so that the message stays. You can tell them, you can give them flyers, but they come back to their home and they close the door and they're all alone. There's no interaction, there's no discussion, no communication. The message is just going to get wasted. What other gaps do you see in this whole game plan that Singapore has?
So maybe before I talk about that, like in Health District at Queenstown, one of the projects that we're working on is to build this Ibasho community hub. So Ibasho is a concept that my colleague, Professor Amy Kiyota, started, trying to empower the older residents. So empowering older residents who are the ones that are usually in the community, right, compared to the younger people, to serve the whole community of old and young, not just for the older people. Yeah, so this is a project that in Health District we're trying to work together with Faith Acts Community Services to hope that, with the relocation, especially with the relocation of older people from Tanglin Hawk to Dawson, for example, how can they experience more warm neighborly life through such kind of opportunities to engage with the neighbors.
So Judith, in terms of gaps, I mean, you have worked closely and your parents, you looked after them, and in the last few years, having access to information. We have AIC, but the information is fragmented, or the information is controlled because it is tiered, it is means testing. So where one hand we are trying to promote aging in place, but yet on the other hand, it's so hard to get access to information. The right resources is who you know. I mean, we spoke to friends and said, hey, there's a resource you can get 3,000 off a lifter, you can get grants for this, you can grants for that, but there is no one central
Information
listing
center.
that we can get. So I think that's a big gap where ministry wise and stat board, they are just totally separate and not in line. I mean, what was your challenges?
My challenges were actually getting a second helper because according to the doctors at the hospital where my dad was, they noticed that not only was my helper stressed, but my mother and myself, in a way, we were also very stressed. So their advice was to get a second helper, but it was so difficult because, it's like you apply and you get rejected and you're not told why you get rejected. Then when you ask why, they said you didn't meet the minimum sum. And when you said, okay, but what is the minimum sum? You're not told. Also, when you're trying to get help, like the night care, AIC will say, okay, you apply and then we will see how we can help you. And it ended up waiting for a couple more weeks before a reply comes.
Yeah.
So, because I hated the waiting game because you are so unsure. You're really unsure until finally you have to pull out the cables and you pull. You turn to friends who have access.
Yeah, I have the same kind of experience. So I think I would say that, compared to normal Singaporeans, I probably have more knowledge, right? Because I'm in this field, learning about aging and studying about aging. So I would think that I have more resources and understanding. But even that, when my dad, needed support with the dementia and and immobility, I was actually quite lost as well. So the AIC was useful in helping us to see, okay, there are some services or rehab services nearby my place, but they will say it's on waiting list. You probably need to wait another 9 months, and that's it. So it's like, okay, then I ask, okay, where can I get respite care? For example, I see that there are respite services for at night where you can send, like maybe we can send my father at night, to a nursing home, and then we can bring him back in the daytime because he doesn't sleep at night. And when I tried to call all the services, they just say, oh, it's full house, or they are not offering it. So sometimes we know that we seem to think that there are services available, but when we really need it, it's not there. Yeah. So how do we bridge that kind of gap? And I think it's really important to help new caregivers, because it's a very stressful period, when somebody suddenly has to be doing caregiving and with no prior experience or knowing where to go. Yeah, so I think that support is really important.
I have a recommendation. When we are young, tracking the development stage of a child is very important. So the first few years, your vaccination, your growth status and stuff like that, we do it well. The kids are checked up to a certain age. I think we need to do it for seniors. Rather than going down that approach of, oh, I'm AIC, you need something, you apply to me. I think it has to be more proactive, where we need to go, or the various government agencies need to go into the community. We all know, you are at certain age, certain onset of certain diseases, certain issues will start coming about. We start engaging, we start going down. How much is CPF? Can we withdraw CPF? 62, 65 or 67 now?
55 you can withdraw once, and then after that I think it's at 62.
Let's make everyone do a health check. We start tracking them from that moment on, 5 years, 10 years, so that we can be more proactive in the community, and then start firstly identifying support that is needed, onset of early disease, any issues, illnesses, diseases, and then really help a lot. I'm in a utopian world, but I think that really makes a difference than having to apply, because people do miss. And when they miss, new caregivers and all, and people who just don't have access to the information are the ones that are suffering, and it just perpetuates it within the community. If we just do it right, we start tackling the issues that aging brings along, I think we can solve a lot of things.
Yeah, I think it's important to plan and also to keep in mind that, of course, it would be good if we don't need such services and all, but it's good to have a knowledge of it. Even things, and back to the environment, home environment, for example, having anti-slip flooring, bars and all those that help to prevent falls. I think these are things that we should try to prepare earlier than later.
Yeah. To end off, we all do financial planning. We all plan for our retirement. And I think part of that planning has to be looking at care for ourselves, or even care for our extended family. So with that, thank you.
Thank you.